Back we have Professor James McCANNEY here, and Professor, you've had some challenges, I guess, in your own connections, etc., going on. And of course, we always have backups of backups here at Nutrimedical. We had our backup generator kicking in, and we have our ISDN line for a while. Your wing generator program, let's get back and talk about that first before we get into all the other things. We see the militarization of Europe now, starting with Greece. I'm sure the other pigs nations will fall. When the economic system fails, they'll be militarizing Europe, and it'll become the fascist United States of Europe rather than the European Union. It won't be the European Union anymore. And, of course, here in America, if that collapse happens there, you can guarantee the same kind of things like Jade Helm that are a dry run for what could happen to Europe will be planned and war-gamed out to happen here as well. People need to be prepared for the fact that the power grid's not stable, the economic system's not stable, your food supply's not stable, and you can't trust the government. And you don't need to be a conspiracy theorist to have the common sense to realize that. Professor McCANNEY, let's talk about wing generator, because the grid's going. I mean, if one thing I can guarantee you I could put money on, I won't put a date, but the grid isn't going to survive either even putting natural, so-called source power, which is really very unreliable, wind and solar. The conventional wind, which is a triple, prop generator rather than the wing generator that can work with power with 2 or 3 miles an hour. And these other alternative energy sources they're talking about, like even solar hydrogen. The fact is, your system is a replacement energy source. It's not just an alternative. It should be called replacement power. Let's talk about this system, because people can purchase the system now, or they can just contribute whether $20 or $100 or $500 to this project, because it's extremely important to move forward. If we had, I think you calculated out the power needs of the world, if we had, I think, was it 1,000 of these 1,000-foot high wing generator projects, you could replace all the nuclear, coal-fired, oil, and other generator systems, and hydro even, in the entire world, and you'd not have any generation of pollution. You'd have you wouldn't have ELF pollution from the regular triple prop type of wind generators, which are very polluting, electro pollution, and you wouldn't be consuming oxygen, which is a real big problem, because our oxygen carbon cycle is very screwed up on our planet now.
Yeah, absolutely. This project, and I want to mention, first of all, the fundraiser, will give the link for that, but more and more engineers are coming online and working along with me on various parts of the project. And when people see this, now these are people that have built components in the alternative energy industry, whether they're inverters or other components, and they look at this and they almost get giddy. They almost are like, this is the thing that everybody has been waiting for. And when you talk to engineers, I was dealing with a guy yesterday. He's doing some work in the background associated with the project. And each person I have to explain enough so that they understand how it works, so that their piece of it, they can incorporate it. And once they start looking at this, they're going, oh my goodness, this is it. This will work. This is going to work.
Right.
And on the large scale. And when these people that have, understanding of engineering, et cetera, look at this and they go, this is going to replace nuclear and coal, and it's going to do it in a big way. And these people, what they do, Dr. Bill? They say, I want to work for you for nothing. That's what these are, engineers. They want to be on this project, because I've heard that a similar thing going on at Airbus. Airbus just introduced their first 2-seater fully electric airplane. Their engineers are clamoring to get on that project. Why? Because they know that's the future. And it's just something about this: electric airplanes, trains, automobiles, the other things we're doing. But when these engineers finally understand everything that I've been through to design this, and they're picking up piece by piece, and a lot of them don't understand all of the ramifications yet. They're just like, wow, what can I do to help? That's what they're saying.
The history is there have been air compressor vehicles in Europe for about 30 years plus. Your wind generator, and I'm an outside novice, but I have a scientific background, so I'm just going to lay out what I've discovered, what you've taught me. This is a system that can use airflow down to very low flow rates. In fact, 5 years ago, I had an engineer come out and actually analyze if I could use solar or wind. So I looked at solar. It's very expensive. To replace all our power needs in that backup, it would be, probably well over $100,000. To put solar wind up would be, again, depending on when the wind blows, and he said you had to have consistently something like 15 to 18 miles per hour wind for these triple prop wind generators. And by the way, they generate a lot of electro pollution. Your system is completely different. It's a large wing, in a sense, a bunch of wings, where everything's on the ground in terms of power generating system. There's no moving parts in it. It's not a complex gearing system like the triple prop generator. And that wing literally will be moved by very, very slow amounts of wind, like 2 or 3 miles an hour. Its peak capacity can be, for the 12 meter, would generate 10 kilowatts, which is 240 kilowatt hours per day. That's kind of like a low ballpark. It could be even more than that. But again, a low ballpark, even with relatively low wind speed. And you could store that power either in deep cycle batteries or, as we talked about, the light sail project, which I'm still trying to track down why they're not responding as quickly as they should have. The light sail energy is a system where they can store up to 750 kilowatt hours in a moisturized air compressor chamber, and they can re-release that power later. The combination, either deep cycle batteries or a light sail type energy storage, and these are scalable. In fact, the light sail was supported by Bill Gates and others in the project at Silicon Valley with my niece Danielle Fung, and she's the one who's actually developed the project. And what people should understand is that your wing generator project would solve 3 major issues. Number one, it would provide power to remote areas that would not require a grid system. It would provide industry, which could be electronic. They could have satellite links and so on. It would provide power to power up electric vehicles, so they wouldn't need to have gas stations and storage tanks and oil tankers and all the other things. These are pretty dramatic things, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the ramifications here are immense. And if you look at the cost, let's take something simple like a hot dog. You go to a ball game, you buy a hot dog. Or even go to the store and buy a pack of hot dogs, $2, $3, whatever, for 8 hot dogs, let's say. That's you're running 50 cents a hot dog. You know where
Right.
most of that cost is? It's in transportation and fuel and energy. Right. And that hot dog should cost you about a penny. So that's scalable in all the things we do, whether it's automobiles, whether it's your shoes, whether it's the lettuce in your salad. Look at everything around. If you're an artist, canvas for your artwork, for the paint, everything you are doing is probably a 10 to 50 time increase because we are paying energy in all of that, transportation.
Exactly.
Now let's take an economy where you can scale back by a factor of 10 to 50.
Exactly. Keep that thought, Professor McCANNEY. We'll be back in just a moment. And again, check out the Wing Generator Project at the top of our announcements page. And of course, Professor McCANNEY's DVDs and videos and materials, Tier 1 Science, back in a moment. Because we had the internet troubles last time, but I know you had an interesting discussion over at the Power Hour talking about these issues, and you basically offered people to call into the program, and I offer them now, 800-259-5791, 800-259. As I said already, and again, I don't know the full range of all your knowledge base, but I'd say on the surface, I agree with 90% of what you say. I have my own sources, but I know several things are absolutely correct that you've said. Number one, there's no object in the inner solar system inside the Oort cloud that it indicates that by any means it's a planet or a giant comet or a dwarf star. There may be something out in deep space, and there's definitely something going on there in deep space, because we know Tycho Brahe saw something affecting the orbit of Neptune over a century ago. Tycho Brahe, the Danish astronomer, using Newtonian physics. This is long before Einstein. But the fact is that action at a distance can affect the sun. Action at a distance can affect the nuclear and plasma physics of planets to increase their core activities and change the geophysics of the planet. But the passive object, as you said before, has to cause a differential gravitonic effect on the crust of the Earth and the mantle that can cause a disjunction, then that can be continent forming, and it has happened in the past. In fact, there's geological evidence that large objects, whether it's a comet or a planet-sized object or a dwarf star 50 or 100 million miles away, they can literally have gravitonic effects that can differentially affect the geotectonics of the Earth. And this interesting thing is, if you tie this to magmatic water, it turns out water in the ringwoodite 400 to 700 kilometers down is released by these geothermal effects of plasma physics, and the water as it comes out actually lowers the melting point of rock. So it actually, where there's magma, there's always water. In other words, the giant fault lines along San Andreas in California and Nevada, the caldera up in Yellowstone, means there's an ocean of water down there because magma itself means it came from water. So, Professor McCANNEY, I'd like you to kind of highlight this stuff about planetary effects, and you've been on a number of programs over the years and DVDs. People have mistaken out of context your information. I think there are passaging cataclysmic objects, but there's no evidence of something in our inner solar system right now. There is evidence something's out there, and there is evidence that cataclysm is just the nature of our galaxy and our universe, isn't it?
No, that's absolutely correct. And the way I put it is that, like a forest fire, like
our connection with Professor McCANNEY is wavering. Let's see. He was talking and then all of a sudden cut off. Let's see if we can get him back. He said, like a forest fire. I agree. I just did a little analysis in kind of a blurb last week. There's 10,000 dwarf stars, for example, not including planet-sized and comet-sized objects, but 10,000 dwarf stars for every star in our galaxy, and only 10% are entrained in an orbital pattern, even hyperelliptical, around a sun or dual sun system. 73% of the stars in our galaxy are binary, and 13 to 14% are trinary. And a star gives off more radiation in part of the electromagnetic spectrum than it receives, so that technically Jupiter is a star because it gives off more infrared light and X-rays than it receives from the sun. And that means that Jupiter is actually technically a star, and dwarf stars, even though there may only be 7 degrees above absolute zero, like a red dwarf can have 200 times the magnetic field, flux field of a yellow dwarf star like our sun Sol. So it's important to understand that cataclysms, like Velikovsky's work with Einstein on Venus having an abnormal rotational spin direction, was a captured comet, and it occurred many thousands of years ago. It looks like I guess we lost our connection. I can hear that English-sounding voice there trying to connect to Professor McCANNEY, and it says he is there. So Deanna, I think you can probably try to reconnect him. He is. I guess we lost him, but he probably should be available again. So let's keep on trying. So what that means basically is when we have a situation like that. Calling him back. Okay, that's good. When we have a situation like that, we're dealing with things where there's a lot of non-experts out there, such as Marshall Masters, John DiNardo, many others, who take things out of context. And I agree there is a future cataclysm coming to the planet, but these objects don't need to pass anywhere near even 55 million miles from the Earth, or even further out in deep space, and they already have dramatic effects on the sun. So it's important that we have that ability to do so. So we'll try to get Professor McCANNEY back. So in other words, what's happening is we are seeing increased volcanism and earthquakes. Like it says in Matthew 24 with Jesus' comments, there should be increase in earthquakes in diverse places. An earthquake is always related to the release of water as oxygen and hydrogen from ringwoodite. We've got Professor McCANNEY back. So Professor McCANNEY, there's a direct link between astrophysics and plasma physics in the electric universe that you were coined many years ago, and the release of magmatic water from deep in the Earth, or the core activity of planets like Jupiter and other planets that basically are nuclear reactors. Can you kind of explain to people the kinds of cataclysms that are even action at a distance are already happening from deep space objects?
The issue with magnetic fields, electric fields, is they're shielded. And they're fairly short range, even though we think of them as being more powerful than, say, gravitation. If you have an electric object or if you have a magnetic object in space, in fact, the Earth has a thing called the magnetosheath. It's out about 35,000 miles on the sunward side, and outside of that, you would not detect Earth's magnetic field. Right. So it's when objects get within these short distances when things interact and can happen. There's a lot of confusion. For example, people talk about pole shifts and the wandering North Pole. There's a difference between magnetic North Pole and celestial or rotational magnetic North Pole.
Right.
The rotational North Pole is different from the magnetic North Pole. And recently heard somebody say, well, the rate of movement of the magnetic North Pole is increasing, so that must indicate something. Well, actually what's happening, it's making a beeline up to the rotational North Pole, which is what it should be doing. Right. And that's recovering from about 4,000 years ago when the North Pole, both the magnetic and the rotational North Pole, were in the in Ontario, and there was a physical pole shift. But at any rate, these are rather complex issues. One of the problems you have with the internet specialists is that they talk about things. They've heard a few buzzwords, and they really don't understand.
Yeah, they don't understand it fully, right? We'll be back in just a moment with Professor McCANNEY. Hopefully we'll keep him on the line and keep our connection going with the storms happening up at Genesis Studios. Back in just a moment. If you have questions, 800-259-5791. Open lines are ready for you to ask the professor any question. Professor McCANNEY, I'm going to pretend I'm one of these people who are calling in. So that maybe we'll have to, because they obviously don't have the guts to call in and actually challenge you or I. Number one, cataclysm is coming. We don't know. We're not going to say what day, year, month, or century. But there are large objects that pass the planet, whether it's a comet or a planet-sized object or a dwarf star, even at a very long distance. Even passing the Oort cloud outside of the system, it can actually have action at a distance. Some of these hyperelliptical, if you call it comets that come in from deep space that have never been in the inner solar system, they're obviously being pushed in by a large object or objects in plural, because space, in fact, is like a shooting gallery. And if I was one of these people, I'd say, well, don't you think that these cataclysms are going to happen in our lifetime or sooner? And of course, they make these open-ended statements, but it has to be based on science. I think there's an increase in plasma physics of the planets because there is action at a distance. I see the activity of the sun definitely changing because the spectral pattern of the frequencies are changing. How would you tie this through with some of these crazy theories people have of impending cataclysm any day? I mean, I think we lost Professor McCANNEY. Are you back, Professor?
Okay, I'm back this time. I'm on a different connection, so hopefully this will hold.
Yeah, hopefully this will hold. I guess obviously it could be whether it's the powers that be don't want us to talk about this, because I know several times we've had the same kind of issues. How would you respond to people trying to make their crazy theories? I believe cataclysm is coming, but I'm not going to put a date on it. I think it's gradually increasing.
No. Yeah, and the problem is there are many natural events going on, and you can't really attribute everything to, say, something coming into the solar system. There's really, and I keep repeating this, there's no indication that there's anything coming into the solar system at this time. And I have to say it very carefully so people don't misquote me.
Right.
There's still all of these idiots running around the internet trying to misquote me. But there's nobody that's done more for proponent of the idea of many Planet X objects. In fact, I've been so successful at this that the standard scientific community came out last January and announced that they had discovered 2 out in the region of the Kuiper Belt. And they know they're there because they see the motion of these smaller objects, of which they've discovered thousands. And I'm the one that predicted that those planets should be there because they should be forming around in that dust cloud that's what I call the nebular ion cloud. Standard science has not anticipated any of this. And so the only thing they could do is confirm. It's like when Goddard came out and said Mars has oceans, or had oceans, and then they say, well, billions of years ago. I was so successful in promoting the idea that Mars had oceans that there was no other thing they could do than to come out and actually say exactly what I was saying and try and take credit because of their power of the press. But and then this whole issue of trying to defame me, claiming that I'm either saying Planet X is here, which I don't say, or saying that I shipped and didn't and have denied Planet X, which is totally false. You know, I'm being so successful. When people want to know about this topic, they turn to me. I was going to mention also that next Thursday, not tomorrow, but next Thursday, July 23rd, is the 20th anniversary of the discovery of Hale-Bopp. And back in the 90s, my work was central to the whole issue of Hale-Bopp, all of that going on. So what I am doing is I'm doing a special on Hale-Bopp and an update review on Planet X. This is a very involved topic. Plus, there's going to be 3 extra hours of radio lecture. And this is all announced on my webpage, so go to my webpage, jmccsei.com. That'll be not tomorrow night, but the next Thursday night, July 23rd, and something that literally everybody's going to want to partake in and listen.
Now, the Planet X, if you were to summarize, when people try to take out of context, you see Planet X things, you show the theoretical framework how Planet X, like Velikovsky's work with Einstein, is a very real thing. But there's all kinds of objects. There are comets, large and small, asteroids, and then there are also dwarf stars of various sizes, from brown dwarf to red dwarf. These are real. They have passed the Earth over the billions of years. And the fact is that the planet has gone through cataclysms that's caused continent formation and mountain formation. And the fact is it's in our future. We don't know exactly when, but we do know from work that I know from classified sources from the SBT, in that article, McMurdo Bay, by a consortium of international astronomers and radio telescope experts, etc., that they're watching out there. The fact is the globalists are scrambling to get underground because they know there are things happening, and they're concerned, but they don't probably have enough complete knowledge. They just see increased volcanism and earthquakes and extreme weather that's out of control. I mean, our weather right now, our jet stream is all screwed up. Whether it's geoengineering, which I think is, if you wanted to say what's really dangerous, it's our response to whatever we think is going on and our manipulation of the weather with geoengineering and our geopolitical and financial issues that we are putting ourselves in danger of proliferating nuclear weapons like after this deal with Iran. It's going to guarantee every nation in the Middle East will want or have to have nuclear weapons because it just delays Iran's getting them. It means everybody else in there will have to have one. So we're the biggest danger, not a deep space object. It's deep evil in our geopolitical system and the fact that we don't protect the grid or get alternative energy or protect food supplies. This is why when the financial system collapsed in Greece, they're going to have a military coup come in to take over the Greek government. I can just see it coming. But by the fall, I expect Greece to fall and Europe to invade Greece with NATO.
You're absolutely correct. The biggest danger right now is the United States and NATO. NATO is expanding. They have picked up a number of countries in South America and in other countries. They now span Africa. They're on every continent, which is an extremely dangerous situation because that means if one of these smaller, really pretty insignificant countries decides to have a border war, that means the United States can come in and duke it out with whoever it's another way of infiltrating countries. And so if they put enough positions, NATO allies, so to speak, in these smaller third world countries, they can literally cause Russia and other countries to come in, Iran or other countries that are heavily armed, to come in and bolster up those countries and literally guarantee a third world war that is literally a third world war, where a lot of these small countries that would not be involved in shooting match will all of a sudden be there with tanks and armored personnel carriers and their little armies, even though they're not very powerful, fighting it out. But then with the U.S. coming in and cleaning house, so to speak. So it's an extremely dangerous situation worldwide. But the issue of celestial objects, these things can come in very fast unannounced. So the problem is with all of these little minions running around, jumping up and down, and these are people that aren't scientists.
Well, in 2029, there's
and they're making all kinds of claims, and in a real world, they wouldn't get the time of day.
Right.
But the whole problem starts with NASA. We don't have a reliable space agency of any kind, or a spokes agency for science. Therefore, all of this other garbage is allowed to exist and can exist because we don't have a space agency.
Well, the NASA, if you take about the Hebrew, is high and lifted up. They're basically a scam agency to try to give us disinformation about the real space projects of what we're doing on the moon and Mars and how we can have all kinds of things going on and what's really happening. The fact is that the globalists know more than, obviously, the average person out there, but there isn't an impending immediate disaster going to happen, but lots of things can, like the caldera and Yellowstone, which we talked about. 595791. I'm just going to lay out what I think is likely to happen. The globalists create chaos, and we are, again, part of that globalist chaos system. The current deal, for example, that Obama, smiling Mickey Mouse idiot creature that he is, comes on smiling that he's got this wonderful deal, having a 24-day window to get verification that Iran doesn't have nuclear materials or is enriching or creating bombs. The fact is that by itself will not only encourage more terrorism, because Iran is a terror-sponsoring state. Number two, it'll encourage other nations to get nuclear weapons, because if you have the Shiites having weapons, well, the Sunnis, who also financed AQ Khan up in Pakistan, the Waziristani facility, they're going to have nukes as well. Then if you have any conflict with Israel, Israel has 800 to 1,200 nukes in a satellite system called ImageSat, which I've actually got contacts inside the Israeli security police and forces, so I know lots of classified material about it. Israel's weapon systems are second to none, and that means the U.S. and Russia. And we have a situation where we have the globalist bankers creating chaos, like in Greece. They should have written off the debt and allowed them to get out of this mess. You can't starve people or have them die or have people throw their fish in the streets because they can't sell it. You can't collapse economies and think it's fine to destroy people and kill them. And you can't set up a police state where you turn Europe, a advanced, cultured, Western cultured countries, into a police state where, because of the economic chaos caused by these bankers, you can do this. The geoengineering of the weather, geotectonic triggering off of earthquakes, the one, I think 4 years ago in China, in Western China, people need to realize that was triggered off by us. We used geotectonic, space-based plasma weapons to trigger off that quake. There's very good evidence that the Fukushima Daiichi, even though it's an earthquake zone, didn't have the typical P waves that you'd see of a normal subduction zone off the Fukushima Daiichi, 75 miles. That what we have is probably an artificially induced, with the tectonic energy locked in the rocks, released subduction tsunami that caused that disaster. It was triggered off because of the geopolitical and financial, if you will, wrangling going on behind the scenes. Professor McCANNEY, you had some comments on that.
Absolutely, yeah. Japan had recently moved some nuclear material to Iran, and of course the end result was the Mossad took out Fukushima as a punishment in Japan. The earthquake, the tsunami, all of that was faked. And then the end result was the blowing up of Fukushima, which poisoned the Pacific Ocean. These people are insane. This is a worldwide insanity going on. But these are the same people, the same lot that had million-man armies, waves of million-man army in World War I going across the Western Front. It's not like they care. It's not
right.
like they have a conscience. It's not like they're anywhere close to people. And so, and these are the people that are influencing the running of Washington. The European banking cartel in Israel. Let's make it as simple as possible.
What you have is you have to realize that the state of Israel is run by soulless, brainiac, evil, satanic wizards. And our country is run by the most evil people that have ever lived in history. Look at Obama. He's just an example. He was created by, I call him the Photoshop, kid. He was created by Zbigniew Brzezinski, the Grand Chessboard author, Council on Foreign Relations. His funding, even for so-called Columbia University time, was by a Saudi billionaire. He's a closet Muslim who went to a madrasa in Malaysia. People need to start kind of getting the message here. We have a 32-degree, high-level satanic bisexual Mason who is totally a sock puppet for the globalists, literally. And he doesn't care what he does. And, of course, this deal that he's made is going to guarantee, as some shrill Republicans have said, is the worst deal and the greatest traitor in American history. The fact is you can't trust the Iranians. You certainly can't trust the Israelis either. But if you're in a nation of Israel surrounded by your enemies, what are you going to do? You're going to be armed to the teeth and ready to clobber them. And we've guaranteed, with this deal, a nuclear war will happen at some point in the future in the Middle East. We've also guaranteed that the economic collapse of Greece, because they won't write off the debt and set up Glass-Steagall, which they're trying to push in other countries, will guarantee Europe will become a militarized police state in the next, probably, I'd guess, 5 years. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the world is, as I said, becoming a very dangerous place. Well, what I'm doing is moving ahead with my wing generator project. And what I'm meeting also, Dr. Bill, are a lot of people who are simply stepping off the train and going their own way. Groups of people, and we talked about this before, creating their own monetary system. They're the one thing that they all lack is being able to get off the standard power sources, the electric grid, and using oil for transportation. And so they are stepping up in line, waiting for my wing generator project. But this is, let me make a prediction, and I've never said this on the air before. There will be a time when a foreign army marches into the United States to liberate the American people, just like happened in Germany.
Right.
This will happen someday. And before it happens, and frankly, I don't know if any foreign army will actually do that. And so it will get to the situation where that's what's needed. But I don't think that other countries will take the effort and the expense. If they have somehow saved their own country, they're just going to stop there and say, hey, the United States caused all of this. Just let them rot over there. That's what's going to happen.
It's not even really the U.S. It's the U.S. Several of our banks, like the Bank in New York, belongs to the board of the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor reserve. 5 of the other 6 board members are all European, and in fact, the Queen of the Netherlands, Belgium, is actually Queen Beatrix is actually the chairwoman of the Federal Reserve System. People need to understand what we have is a situation where, and by the way, the Rothschilds and all of these so-called Sabbatean Satanistic banks were given a charter under the Vatican, and it's the Jesuits at the Vatican that have controlled the world financial system for the last almost 700 years.
Hundreds of years, if not thousands. Yeah. Right,
and close to 1,000 years. And in fact, the entire system of banking is Jesuit, period. So when the Pope makes statements that he supports this or that, or the Pope makes a statement about what's going on in Europe, you have to take this seriously. This man is an anti-Pope. We have the abomination of desolation in the White House as a sock puppet for George Soros and Zbigniew Brzezinski. We have the Pope, who's an anti-Pope, who's certainly not a Christian in his statements. We have the Russians being riled. It says in the Bible, in Ezekiel 38:39, I shall put hooks in your jaws and I shall pull you down from the north parts. So Russia's not coming willingly. They're being forced into this conflict in the Ukraine and the Middle East. Same as China. They're being forced by the actions of the globalists to create the chaos, to actually force them into a form of conflict with the West. You can see this coming, can't you?
That's what I was saying. Yeah, that's what I was saying. By the expansion of NATO into non-NATO regions, NATO is North Atlantic Treaty Association. There's nothing North Atlantic about it anymore. It's in
right.
Africa, it's in South America.
Saakashvili of Georgia is a good example. The Thai-eating drug addict in Georgia. We have a situation where in Tbilisi, where the Rokai Tunnel, which is in South Georgia, that contains a lot of the pipelines coming through the Ukraine from Russia, they had to have Russia. What was doing is the Georgian government was shelling areas where primarily Russian citizens living in Georgia, and killing citizens that were defenseless. This is back, 5 years ago. And of course, the Russians eventually came in with their special forces, and they clobbered them. And by the way, they found, I think, 1,500 Israeli special forces in there, British and other ones, SAS, and the Russians killed them all. You don't hear that in the news, do you? You don't hear the news that the fact the Russians had to clean house because these maniacs were there shelling and killing Russian citizens in South Georgia near the Rokai Tunnel where the gas pipelines go. And it was a direct provocation to Russia to say, hey, do you want to fight? Well, this isn't wise. So don't worry about a deep space object. Worry about the deep space that's occurring in your geopolitical system and the fact that they aren't protecting the grid and they're creating new bioweapon bombs, and why they're literally creating a cataclysm. They're masters of chaos. That's what you need to worry about. Yeah, there's disasters coming to the planet. It'll probably come during the tribulation. And in fact, I believe such an event would cut off those days. That it says, I shall cut off the day and the night by a third, lest those days kill every man, woman, and child on earth, as it says in Mark 5. I think a solar and galactic cataclysm would cut off these maniacs from killing most of humanity. So I think in a sense,
exactly,
it would be the opposite of what you think. It would stop them from their planned annihilation of the human race.